Good. Now we go.
Now
I have
you're
to say
recording. Yeah.
verstanden. It says, yeah. Fabrice, the good thing is we can go back and forth, and Ellie will be the one. She's in the end putting it all together, so it makes sense, right? So it can be just a chat.
Oh,
So and
sure.
then, yeah. So there's many things I want to ask you today, but let's jump in with one thing that I saw recently. Is you went to Antarctica.
Yes.
Tell me about it. It's so cool. I maybe to start, I saw that guy. His name is Colin O'Brady or Colin Brightly. He was like the first guy to ever do it, to went through it. And I
Yeah.
saw this video on stage when he was talking about it, and I was like, "What the?" And then then I saw you doing it, and I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. Would love to hear about it."
So yeah, so let me tell you first a little bit of personal information. I like to do these crazy adventure travel type trips where I'm alone off grid and I take my backpack, my sleeping bag, and my water filtration system and a knife. And I've mostly not mostly, I've only done them in warm weather environments, be it in like Kauai or in Costa Rica or in various rainforests and jungles around the world, alone or with a friend or with a guide, um, or with a team. And in 2 years ago, I was contacted by Kevin Ryan, who's obviously another unicorn founder, an amazing New York tech founder, and he said, "Hey, I've been asked to sponsor this scientific expedition." And the objective of the scientific expedition is to understand how if there's a way to predict who's going to do well in these extreme environments ahead of time, because in 2017 or 2018 there was a team of British military SAS that went to a coast to pole trip, whatever, 50, 60 days. And despite the fact that they're all young and super fit, they didn't do particularly well. Many of them failed. They didn't make it. Is there a way to sponsor a similar expedition where we do a 50% male, 50% female, and some people on a vegan diet, some people not a vegan diet. And we're doing two tests. One is coast to pole, the 60 days, and the other one is 2 weeks, last degree. And as a sponsor, you can join this part of the expedition, the last degree, and it's like 2 weeks on the ice, fully disconnected. And it was right up my alley, invited by a good friend that I thought I would be able to spend great time with. So I'm like, okay, let's do it. And it's only a couple hundred kilometers. So I'm like, oh, this is not going to be really hard. I could walk 20, 30, I could easily walk 40K a day, right? Like, oh yeah, 4 days, we're done. Uh, I was really wrong. This was one of the hardest things I've ever done. So first of all, it took a fair amount of training. So in the spring of 2022, I went to Finse in Norway to actually train for this. You're pulling 100-pound pulk
Wow.
or a sled, if you want, with your food, your tent, your fuel, etc. You need to learn to walk with this. You need to learn to make your tent. You need to learn to melt the snow, make your food, and a bunch of skills, frankly, that you wouldn't have anywhere else, especially including the equipment you need. You need very specialized equipment to deal with like what is negative 30 temperature, but with wind chills negative 50. And you need different layers. You need things when you're resting, when you're not resting, and so you need to buy the equipment, test it to make sure it fits and works, etc. So December 30th, 2022, fly to Punta Arenas in Chile, uh, and actually spent with the team. So it's a team of 10 people with 3 guides for the last degree, and there was a separate team doing the full 50 or 60-day walk from the coast of the pole.
So
Um,
they have done this before.
some had, most had not. The guides, yes, the guides have done this many times before. The guides were
Wow.
their seasonal. The season is very short. The season is mid-November to mid-January. We were actually part of the very tail end, so it's a very short summer, um, which is the warmest and best weather time to do this. It's also light 24/7. So we then flew from Punta Arenas, the southernmost tip of Chile, to a staging area in called Union Glacier Station in Antarctica. And we got everything ready. And from there, we flew to where we started our walk. We started the walk. And so it was way harder than I thought, because it's a combination of you start at 10,000 feet altitude or 3,000 meters, which is reasonably high. And so low oxygen. It's light 24/7. You're exercising 8 hours a day, more than 8 hours a day. You do 8 stints of 1 hour where you walk 15 minutes, you stop for 10 minutes to rest and to eat. And you do that 8 times, and you have to eat. If you don't eat, you're going to pass out because you're consuming 7,500 calories a day. I lost half a pound a day every day that I was there, despite eating 6,000 calories a day.
Wow.
And you walk 40,000 steps a day. And then when you finish the day, you need to make your camp, plant the tent, dig a ditch, like melt the snow. So you're exhausted. So it's super cold, super hard. Um, Way harder than I thought. But ultimately, it was an amazing exercise in a few things that you rarely get to do in this modern age. A, disconnection, right? You are in a world that's hyper connected. It's very rare that you have 2 weeks, no cell phone, no news, no WhatsApp, no emails, no calls, no nothing, alone, either with your friends, and I would talk 1 or 2 hours a day with amazing people, building amazing relationships, or alone with your thoughts. So it kind of felt, and I don't know if you know what a Vipassana meditation retreat is, but it kind of felt like an active Vipassana meditation retreat. And it was an exercise in aloneness and gratitude. So I sang mantras, I did meditation, and I felt extreme infinite gratitude to be in this environment with my team and my friends, to have a team of workers that can support me and allow me to do this and not need me to be there at all times. I have a family that support me, my friends in my crazy endeavors. And gratitude to be and experiencing something so unique where there's literally nothing. I mean, it's infinite ice and white in every direction. There's no life. There is nothing. I mean, it has downsides. It means you need to poop in a plastic bag in -50 temperature and carry it with you for 2 weeks, which is not the most pleasant thing you've ever done. It's extraordinarily exhausting, but it was amazing to have done. And yeah, I think it's a real privilege. So it was an exercise in gratitude. It was an amazing silent meditation, an amazing bonding experience with people in the team and the friends that I made that I had that went on the trip with me. So amazing. Having done it, I'm definitely not doing it again. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, including creating a startup and running it for decades. And yeah, amazing. So I think my next adventure is going to be a warm weather adventure. I haven't decided what it is, but it's not doing this again.
When you start a startup, you know it's hard, but you don't know it's that hard, right? In this particular case, I'm pretty sure you knew this is very hard. So
I
I
didn't
tried to
think it
find
was going to
it.
be that hard, actually. No, it was harder
Oh,
than I expected.
okay. No, because
It was
I want
exactly like a startup. I did not know what I
so
was doing. I did not know what I was getting myself into. I didn't have the right equipment for it. I had to learn along the way. It's like it's a start. It was exactly like a startup.
and do you then think this is DNA or you think it's cognitive how you grew up? Like where it's often questions on startup, right? But also here you must be to a certain point crazy to do it, right? Like what is the thing that makes humans like become these founders, but also do this kind of exercise?
Yeah, I mean, look, a few things I learned. I'm going to answer the question. There'll be a few things I learned is A, you can push yourself more than you think you can, and I think that's true in every environment. You can go to the gym and lift more than you think. You can push yourself more in this environment, walking or in a startup. You can work 100+ hours a week for years on end if you really must, right? Like push comes to shove, your ability to push yourself is greater. Now, not everyone is made of that, and in fact, the objective of this study was actually who makes it, who doesn't make it. Can you tell ahead of time based on their physiology, blood tests, et cetera, and their DNA and their personal mental profile? Um, Clearly, there's one thing I think founders have in common is that we're more tolerant to risk than most. I'm not saying we're risk seeking, right? Like it's always on a risk adjusted basis. And in fact, I don't think we take that many risks as startup founders, but I think by taking a bit more risk than most people is highly rewarded. And so I think if you're willing to take a bit more risk, and of course, I love these types of extreme. I think I like it. I have definitely a predisposition for it. I like it both in work, building startups, and in life, like extreme heli skiing, kite surfing, or like being an adrenaline junkie. I think you feel most alive where like the verge of dying and where you're like you feel purpose, you feel a sense of accomplishment and meaning that is unparalleled. Now, not everyone is wired that way. Some people don't like it. Where does it come from? Unclear. Um, I don't think it's not common. I don't think it doesn't. I'm not even sure it's nature or nurture. I think it may just be random number generator X factor. Look if you have three siblings in a family, um, and they can end up being all completely different despite the same genes, same nature, same environment of growing up, same nurture, same parents, same teaching philosophy, and yet they're completely different. And so I suspect that there's this other X factor that makes a subset of the population more risk-taking, thrill-seeking, and adrenaline junkie-ish, but also optimistic. I think the other characteristic that defines founders and for people to do these things is optimistic, that the odds don't apply to you, right? Like the 5-year survival rate of a startup is like 5%. So you have a 95% chance of failure after 5 years. And so you have to be delusional enough to believe that you can change these odds and you're going to make it happen. And if you have that level of confidence in yourself and ability and optimism, it probably applies to other things like, yeah, heli skiing is dangerous, but not for me. I'm so good. It's gonna be fun. It won't be dangerous. Same with kite surfing. Same with all the crazy shit I do. I used to car race as well and motorcycle race and yeah, I play paintball. I mean, and yeah, I think I'm built optimistic and grateful.
I remember you had a paintball field in New York when I visited you 12
I had a
years ago.
paintball field in my garden. I threw
I was
paintball
there in the
games every
garden.
weekend.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah,
It was so cool. So yeah, so grit, resilience, optimism. You said the SAS
gratitude.
didn't
Yeah.
gratitude. You said the SAS were not performing as good as expected.
Well, because they're 25 and they're super fit, so you'd think they would have done well. So here's the lessons we learned from this. On average, women did better than men, because women have a bit more body fat than men, and when they were walking, they would burn fat and not muscle. And so, whereas when you start burning muscle, like your body fully shuts down. So on average, women did better than men. Number two, you cannot be in a vegan diet in an extreme environment. After a week, everyone in a vegan diet basically died and had to stop. They literally either gave up or switched to a non-vegan diet.
Interesting. Even Mike Tyson switched before the fight from vegan back to meat, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's okay in a normal, safe, boring environment. You're in a city where you're burning 2,000 calories a day. It doesn't work when you're burning 7,500 calories a day. And so that was another interesting lesson. And by the way, within a week, it was clear. Like it was like the guys on a vegan diet were like just falling apart and dying. And so they didn't want to make and those who switched were some of those who switched were okay. The others dropped off. And again, if you're living in a city and you can take supplements, etc., maybe it's not a big deal. But if you're in an extreme environment, not that didn't work. And by the way, if you go back 20,000 years, we were all omnivores, right? Like we were hunting the mammoth, and and we'd have feast and famine. We'd eat mammoth. We'd eat. I mean, the paleo diet, if you want, you'd eat a little bit of everything, but that was found in nature, and including deer and mammoth and whatever else. Though we would be intermittent fasting because you'd find the mammoth, you'd eat like a king, and then for 3 days you'd be hunting the next patch of food until you caught one. So it'd be automatic forced intermittent fasting.
So sorry that I go one more, but I think it's so interesting on hearing on you this thing. I have two more questions. One is because I think people would love to hear. You probably have a certain point of fear before you do this. No, will I make it? Will I not make? What if, like, is a helicopter picking me up? Like, what like there must have been a certain amount of fear before you have started. And so my question to people who may read this is like, how to overcome and how do you see this overcome fear? And two, there is a Will Smith who says why he's more successful, right? He says he's not more beautiful, he's not stronger, he's not everything, but he says you put me and another guy on a treadmill, I rather die. I will be on a treadmill. And this is
Yeah.
also similar. So the one is overcoming fear and starting, and the other one is endurance while you am in it, embracing pain. So maybe you could speak to these two things, and I would
Yeah.
just
So
love to hear it.
for the first point, I'm not sure I'm the right person to speak to because fear is not a feeling I often, if ever, experience in any context, frankly. I don't remember the last time I've been afraid of anything.
So
Um,
sorry, but this means you went there and you had zero fear on that you maybe will like who would a helicopter pick you up or something like plan B?
Yeah, plan B. There, you okay? You get emergency evacuated. Look. Here's why I never had fear. Imagine my first startup essentially failed, right? Like I went from zero to hero back to zero again when the tech bubble burst. And so I went from being worth on paper hundreds of millions to bankrupt overnight. But I didn't fear that. I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen to me? You know, I'm top of my class at Princeton. I used to work at McKinsey. I'm going to get a job at Goldman, or I'm going to get private equity, or I'm going to work at McKinsey. I'm going to run digital media at
But
a
you
media
don't
company.
die in Antarctica. Very
I wasn't
physical
gonna
risk,
die.
no?
If if shit went wrong, my body failed, I'd get emergency evacuated, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I'd also confidence. If I have infinite belief, in which goes to point number two, and my resilience and grit. Like, I will stay on the treadmill as long as it takes to get there. And there was no question in my mind that regardless of how much pain and suffering I needed to endure, I was going to make it. And so I didn't even consider the alternative. Like, it didn't, I don't know, like it's not within the realm of possibility. Failure is not an option. Yeah, like,
And then my last question around this thing, and thank you so much for sharing the experiences on you talked about gratitude and you talked about vipassana. Is there some belief, the divine or anything like? Is there something you fall into when you do these kind of things that something higher or it's something that supports on these feelings?
um, the so I have a meditation practice where I meditate daily. Which frankly just reinforces the way I'm built, right? I'm already built optimistic and grateful, and I just reinforce it through that. I mean, singing of the mantras and moving energy in me, etc. Um, I think these moments where you feel like you're communing with the divine, I've experienced them more on psychedelic experiences than I have in these moments. So in these moments of silent meditations, I think, and silent retreats, I don't feel like I'm commuting the divine. I don't become one with whatever the universal source or energy. And by the way, it doesn't feel religious in that traditional revealed religion sense, right? Like, so it wouldn't be anything close to Christianity. It'd be more like, is there a sense of unity that we are all one, that you are me and I am you, and that all things are connected, that you feel in these deep experiences? Absolutely. But I wouldn't call it religious in the traditional sense. Is there a sensation of something greater than oneself and universal? Absolutely. But wouldn't call it anything. It wouldn't fit the descriptions of any of the religions I can think of, including Hinduism, Buddhism, etc. But like, does it
Kabbalah.
feel that there? Yeah, Kabbalah. Yeah, and by the way, I've studied in pretty much all of these and under the traditions, right? Like, everything from Kabbalah to Tantra to Taoism are things I've read, and I've implemented elements of these into my personal practice.
So, I mean, most of them speak to that you could connect to the divine, right? So in Kabbalah,
Yes,
they would think that Moshe went into the mountain Sinai and he downloaded. So he
yes.
downloaded the wisdom from the universe, and this is also
And
why you
yeah,
don't have fear.
but the only moments where I feel that is if I take whatever psilocybin or magic mushrooms or acid or ayahuasca. Not so much, and I can recreate a lot of these experiences through pure meditation, but it's not the same. It doesn't feel like I'm like completely connected in the way that your individuality disappears, right? Like the entity Fabrice disappears, and you have like ego death, um, and you become one with everything. And there are moments of that, but to me, it's more, again, supplemented rather than not supplemented.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because earlier you spoke to like daily gratitude, and then now you're on the ego, like breaking the ego, where most people think it's the ego you that you have, like being superior, but not what. Just to clarify for everyone who will then read, the ego you're talking about and breaking the ego as a life is the one ego that you have created, and you come back to the pure you where you can connect to everything, right?
Yeah, but well, to be specific, like, to I am in this form and body. I'm Fabrice, who's the tech founder and has all these other characteristics, and you're very aware of what that identity is. But there are moments in these more spiritual practices where you forget that individuality and you become one with everything. And that's why you get these senses of unity where we are all connected and we're all the same. And I don't mean that just to all humans. I feel that the same way about all plants and all animals and rocks and wood and everything, basically. All things created in this universe feel like they come from the same underlying source. That said, again, I don't think doesn't resemble anything that you read in any of the testaments, old or new, or any of the writings.
Maybe the closest Pachamama when you go to Peru.
Yeah. Well,
No, no,
especially if you
that's
take ayahuasca in Peru.
exactly. And then you will be connected to the stone for sure. I remember my guide. I had two guides there, and they were always hugging everything.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, I love that. No, super impressive. I will make a hard cut on that piece, but it was a great start into it. Um, but it brings to go a little bit into more than Fabrice and the person who you are, and talking earlier to the bubble, and maybe we take the grit as the line. And I remember we made an interview, I don't know if you remember, with Job Spotting 10 years ago, but it was
Yep,
already about becoming a founder, and you stumbled into it, and the grit is the common denominator. So yeah, I would love to, if you one retro perspectives also for the readers again on who you are, and tell me about yourself,
sure.
and then we can talk about the grit piece.
Sure. So, French originally. I grew up in Nice in the south of France, which is the most beautiful place in the world to grow up in. You can play tennis every day, go skiing every weekend, you have delightful food, etc. But because in 1984, at the tender age of 10, I got my first PC. And it was love at first click. I immediately fell in love with computers. I knew that computers and I were meant to be together forever. And started programming, started building PCs. I ran a bulletin board service, so kind of like a system people would connect to by modem, and the ancestor of the internet. It was like siloed or islands. Um, and it was super fun. And I became fan of the two big tech founders, or maybe of the '80s, which were obviously Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, and then Michael Dell in the early '90s. And it was obvious to me that my destiny was going to be in tech. Now, what's interesting is I didn't do any of this because I'm like, oh, based on macroeconomic analysis of the future, clearly I need to be in tech because it's going to be a big category. No, it was my hobby. And I got lucky that my hobby became a multi-trillion-dollar category, which led me years later to be at the right time, the right place, with the right skills. Now, in '92, at 17, I went to college at Princeton, studied economics and math, felt that was the most useful things for me to learn at that point in time, and finished off in my class, built a computer export business from the US to Europe, which allowed me to pay for college. Left Princeton at 21 in '96, and I knew I wanted to be in tech, but I'm shy, I'm introverted, never managed a team. Let's learn business. So I went to McKinsey and Company for 2 years. It was kind of business school, except they pay you. And I learned all the things I need to learn: how to work in a team, how to interact with people that don't necessarily have the same type of IQ, by explaining complex concepts in simple ways, improving my oral and written communication skills, working on my public speaking skills, which led me to build my first venture-backed tech startup back in '98. So at 23, I went on and built an eBay of Europe, raised 63 million venture money at 150 employees, grew to 5 countries, grew to like 10 million a month in GMV. And for a hot minute, felt like I was on top of the world. But then, of course, the bubble burst, lost everything. And then 2001, humbled, decided to think through what to do next. And I realized, you know what? I didn't do this for the money anyway. I like creating something out of nothing. I like the 0 to 1. I see myself as a tech founder, and this is the most fun thing I could be doing. And yeah, I would be a big business. There's no money in it. Doesn't matter. This is what I'm meant to be doing. I'm going to be doing it. So I went on to, the constraint I used then was I needed to build a company that could be profitable quickly, absent VC money. In 2001, given the venture ecosystem had died. So I went on to build a company called Zingy, which is a ringtone company. Now, I didn't feel anything particular affinity for ringtones. It was a means to an end. And the end was I want to be a tech founder. I need to be able to do it with no capital. And I'd seen it was profitable in Europe and in Asia. And it was there was an open opportunity in the US. So I launched Zingy in July 2001 in New York. And it was extraordinarily difficult the first few years. I mean, there was no way to connect to the carriers. There was no way to do deals with them. There's no way to do delivery. The music licenses were almost impossible to get. And it was like infinite grit. I mean, I lived in New York essentially on $2 a day for 2 years, slept on the couch at the office. We had a shower at the office. I could afford only 4 pieces of ramen noodle per day. I invested every last penny I had. I borrowed 100,000 of my credit cards, missed payroll 27 times. It was extraordinarily tough. But ultimately, grabbed the victory from the jaws of defeat when on August 15, 2003, we became profitable. And from there, it became a rocket shift. So revenues were a million in 2002, 5 million in 2003, 50 in 2004, 200 in 2005. I sold the company because I'd learned my lesson from the bubble, the sign for cash. Better too early than too late. And I sold it for 80 million in the summer of 2004. I stayed on as CEO actually for 18 months because I'm like, I've never been part of a publicly traded company before. I've never seen this level of hypergrowth. It's actually interesting. Let's ride this through. And left late 2005 to go create my next company. Probably should have taken vacation between the three companies. I didn't take a single day off, which admittedly are probably a mistake. At that point, I'm like 20. At that point, I sold the last company, sold at 29. So at 30, I leave to go build the next company. And what's interesting, by the way, is like the most meaningful point in my life is not the day I sold the company and made like 40 million bucks as a 29-year-old. It's the day we became profitable. Because the day we became profitable, we became masters of our own destiny. And I knew that at that point we were saved and we could do whatever we needed to do on a go-forward basis. The day we sold, frankly, I was so busy because we're growing like this. We're like a total rocket ship. I think I continued to live in my studio apartment. I think I bought myself 2 tennis rackets, a TV, and an Xbox. That was it. My needs were I didn't need $40 million for that. And I kept living at the same apartment for like 3 more years or whatever. Just too busy. And then went on to build OLX. And OLX went back to my first love of marketplaces and network effect businesses. And OLX obviously is the largest classified site in the world today. It's what Craigslist would have been or should have been if it was done right, meaning pre-moderated content, mobile first, friendly to women who are the primary decision makers in all household purchases, and leader now in every emerging market. So OLX is now 11,000 employees in 30 countries. It's the leader in Brazil and all of Latin America, and India, Pakistan, all Southeast Asia, in Russia, Ukraine, Poland, Romania, all of Eastern Europe, and the UAE and all the Middle East, and in Portugal. And I sold the company. I grew it, to massive scale and sold it to Naspers Prosus back in 2010. And actually, again, stayed for 3 years with the buyer. Thought it was an interesting. They gave me $1 billion to play with to go and, grow it, buy the competitors, merge with them, and do all the fun things. And then in 2013, even though I was at the top of the world, I'm like, I like the 0 to 1. I want to go back to 0. And so I left in 2013, gave all my physical non-financial possessions to charity, went down to 50 items, started couch surfing on friends' couches, started, living on Airbnbs. Like literally, I had nothing left. I had no house, no car. Like everything I owned fit in my carry-on, my backpack, and my tennis bag. And started thinking through what to do next. I realized I like building companies. I like investing companies. So with my partner, Jose, we created FJ Labs, which originally was really a family office where we're just investing in.
He was a founder too in marketplace too, and you
So
were
he
moving
was a
forward.
co-founder of Deremate, which is an eBay of Latin America, which I'd helped co-found back in '99 with
Yeah.
Alec Oxenford, who was the other co-founder, who became my co-CEO at OLX. So I'd known them since '99. I'd already pooled my angel investing with Jose for many, many, many years. And so in 2013, created FJ Labs, which was really a holding company. And then we started being approached by third parties who wanted exposure to marketplaces. And so we raised our first external capital of 50 million with one LP in 2016, deployed it in 2016, 2017. And then in 2018, did fund 2 of 175 million with like 20 LPs. And then we just closed in March of 2023, fund 3 of 290 million with like 50 LPs.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And basically what FJ Labs is really, it's a fund that invests in marketplaces and network effect businesses, but the nuance is we really behave like angel investors. This is like angel investing at venture scale. it's what Jose and I were doing personally, just on a venture scale. We don't lead, we don't price, we don't take board seats. We decide in 2 1-hour meetings whether or not we invest. And we try to be super helpful to the founders, both on strategy, but perhaps most importantly on fundraising, which is very valuable in this environment. And it's highly differentiated. Frankly, no one kind of follows the strategy of both specificity in marketplaces and network effects and deciding in 2 1-hour meetings in 1 week if we invest or not. And it's taken on a life of its own. We now have 1,100 investments. We've had over 300 exits. And that's over like 26 years, obviously, since we were angel investing since the very beginning. We have a 40% realized IR, I think it's 39% to be exact, on the 300 plus exits. And we have a team of over 30 people, including 11 people in the investment team. So it's really grown and taken the life of its own. And it's, doing really well. And it's been super fun. And in a way, building a fund from scratch is it's another startup. I didn't join
It's a good
Sequoia.
question. Like
I just
often
went on to
people,
build it. I just went on to build a new company, basically.
yeah, it's my question. Like sometimes people say we're entrepreneurs at heart, but they are not entrepreneurs. But they now founded a fund. How do you see this?
Well, if you create a fund, you're an entrepreneur. I mean, it's all the same things: building a team, building culture, raising money, running a P&L. Yeah, it's exactly like running a company. So again, if I joined Sequoia or Bessemer or whatever, then no, I would just be a VC. But here we're building a company, and I hope to create something that is a legacy institution that will outlast me, the way OLX has outlasted me. And so, but we're also pretty different and very entrepreneurial. Beyond the fact that we're entrepreneurs in the building of a fund, I think we're also entrepreneurs in the fact that we still have a studio business where we build companies. Right now, I'm personally I'm executive chairman and co-founder, but it's like the company I've been leading of a company called Midas, which is a yield-bearing stablecoin backed by U.S. Treasuries. I'm like half time on it, basically.
No, I listened to it on another podcast, and then I decided to skip this one because then we will go into a rabbit hole. But
Yeah.
it's super interesting. You and your co-founder, you have a very, I mean, you know that, right? And I'm very thankful. I hope I can say this, that you're an LP into my fund.
Yep.
But for that reason, I mean, I joined and I met a couple of the people that you work with, and I really love all of them, and your co-founder particularly too. And I love this entrepreneur spirit. What do you think, other than this investment strategy and being angels particular, about FJ Labs?
Well, so the way we evaluate
Sorry,
companies.
and the two of you are very particular
Yeah.
itself. I honestly, I love the two of you. I think you're
Yeah.
one of my favorite investors in the world. And obviously, FJ Labs is the number one go-to marketplace. But I don't think that people who don't know you know what I know, how particular and amazing you are, in my opinion.
Mhm.
But you're very different to any other GP I know, right? So this
Yeah.
is what I try to speak to on the question.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, as I said, we behave like angel investors, right? Like, so we do a few things very differently. One is, if you look at our deal flow, we get about 300 deals a week. About 100 come from other VCs. So every 12 weeks, we share deals with the top 100 VCs in the world in every geo category and industry. We have back 2,000 founders in 1,100 companies, and they send us deals. That's another 100. And then we have cold inbound. We actually look at the cold inbound. So the conversion rate is lower. It's about a third of the deals we get. It's 14% of the deals we do. But we will reply to everyone. We will tell people, and no VCs don't have this ethos of like transparency. Get back to people in a timely manner and tell them yes or no and why. And it's
I
out of
love that.
scope. It's too early. The valuation's too high. We didn't like, we don't think you have the right team to execute on this. Like full transparency, both in the yeses and the nos. We evaluate companies on 4 selection criteria. So, do we like the team? Do we like the unit economics? And we're very unit economic driven. Do we like the terms? And we're price sensitive, and we have a very clear sense of what is fair, and is it in line with our thesis? And we tell people, and we need all 4 to be true. And we're going to tell them where they fall on that, yes or no. And obviously, we say no to 98 to 99% of the companies we see. But that transparency and turnaround, I think, is very unique. And then the reason or value add, like many VCs will promise what they'll do for you as a founder. We'll help you
Yeah,
fundraise, we'll help you
once the
strategy,
deal
we'll
is
help
done,
you
they
hire.
won't.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and they want, or we know what we can't do. We're a small fund. We're 300 million AUM. We can't afford, we don't have psychiatrists, recruiters, headhunters, whatever. Like we do, but the one thing we know how to do very well is we will help you fundraise. We don't lead, so we can act and our because we're sharing deals with the top 100 VCs in the world every 12 weeks, they want differentiated deal flow. So we will take the very top 25, 33% of the companies in the portfolio, we will intro them to the right VCs for them. And this is win-win-win. VCs
Yeah,
love
yeah,
it.
yeah.
They see differentiated deal flow. Founders love it. They get to talk to Bessemer and Sequoia and Andreessen. We love it. The companies get funded, and in return, we get invited to the best deals with the other VCs. It's highly, highly differentiated. But I think all of it is differentiated. We're not ownership sensitive. Uh, we decide quickly. We give you full transparency of where you stand, and we tell you where you stand. Even if you want us to help you raise the next round and we don't believe you're ready, we'll tell you. We'll tell you what needs to change, right? Like this full transparency, and also we've been operators before, so we know what it's like to operate it and what the difficulties you face, and we can give you the proper advice, and then the proactive advice of fundraising, right? Sequoia is never going to introduce you to Andreessen. They see themselves as competitors. We see ourselves as friends for everyone. We will help. We will introduce you whomever you need to be introduced to get funded.
So if I would like to work at FJ Labs, speaking to anyone out there, what is the criteria?
I mean, the problem is it's driven as much by do we have an opening than anything
Let's
else.
imagine let's imagine there is one opening for
Yeah,
associate role.
opening associate role, which there isn't right now. We do have a 2-year analyst program, and so you're graduating from college. Yeah, I mean, look, super smart, super ambitious, super thoughtful. Someone who has strong opinions held loosely and is willing to change their mind. Data driven, and ideally has worked in startups before or has been playing in tech and is thinking. Basically, they're obsessing. We're all nerds. We're all kind of weird in our own way. We're all like whatever video game players who code or home office or whatever automation at home at night and do fun stuff like that. So people that are going to fit our culture, and um, we're highly diverse. We're highly diverse in background, gender, racial mix, etc. We're not diverse in the fact that we're all high Q, all highly driven, mostly from Ivy League schools, right? Like so. Yeah.
Understood. Maybe we take the other side of the medal, the LP view. Let's be nerdy here, and let me put it challenging. If you have on no stake in ownership, the recent fund is 250 million. It's probably harder to return. No, I would argue this, or some LPs would. Could you guide us through the
Oh,
fund
absolutely
economics
not.
and the fund model?
There's a lot of studies out there that show that the more diversified your fund is, the higher your returns. So with we have constantly had a 39% IRR for 26 years, including a angel investment, and a 4x return basically, across everything, cycle, time, category, geography, etc. Because look, this fund is going to have 700 companies or 500 companies. We will have and yes, venture follows a power law. So you want to be in the top 20 companies. We will be in them. And yes, we are never going to have a 10x fund, right? Because obviously, if you have 10 companies, one is 100x, the other 9 are zeros, you have a 10x fund. We will never have that. But because of our discipline on valuation, for instance, we didn't do any late stage investments in 21, and we were selling secondaries on the way up, and we have very high DPI. We're the highest DPI fund out there at the seed or pre-seed stage, because we sell on the way up. We sell our winners, which are also the complete anti VC strategy. We will always be at 3-4x fund. So we're over 20 years, we're going to be top 5%, if not top 1%. Over each fund, we're going to be a top quartile fund. We'll never be top decile because we'll never be a 10x fund, but we'll never not return capital. So actually, no, it's the opposite. Our returns are outstanding. Like I'll stack them against anyone else out there. Diversification means you will do well, and there's a lot of data on why the more diversified you are, the better you do. Even though we don't have ownership requirements, we don't require many of the rights that other people do. We're not on the board. We actually think being on the board is a both a waste of time and yeah.
YC gave out the study where they said they could have taken anyone who applied instead of the one they have chosen, anyone, and they would have the same returns.
Yeah,
Why? By
exactly.
statistics, right? Okay. But just to understand for now, every founder who's applying, then again, you do pre-seed seed, you're the marketplace
No,
guy, but you also do
okay,
other
no, we
things.
mostly do
Okay,
seed.
let's start from scratch one more time.
Yeah. So we are 70% seed in A, 20% B and a little bit onwards, but mostly B, and
Wow, okay.
10% pre-seed. We are very rarely pre-seed. Pre-seed, and the reason we're not pre-seed is we don't invest in competitors, and we don't want to place a bet on a category until we think there's an emergent winner. And sometimes the emergent winner is at seed, sometimes it's A, sometimes at B, sometimes it's later. But like at pre-seed, if they have 7 companies doing the same thing with great teams coming at us, it's hard for us to make a bet. The only exception on the pre-seed side is if you're a second-time founder, someone we've worked with before, doing something new, we'll probably back you up unconditionally.
And vertical?
Every vertical, every industry, every geography. So we're 55% US and Canada, 25% Western Europe, 10% Brazil, India, 10% rest of the world. And rest of the world is like Vietnam, Philippines, Namibia, Nigeria. I mean, it's really rest of the world, like Colombia, Chile, whatever. Industry is every industry. The specialization is network effect businesses and marketplaces. The core thesis these days is mostly around B2B marketplaces, but not limited to it, in 5 sub-theses of B2B marketplaces. Like inputs, like digitizing offline supply chains, for petrochemicals, steel, gravel, whatever. Helping SMBs compete with large chains and SMB enablement writ large. Number 3, friendshoring and moving supply chains from China, mostly to India. So it's like India to India or India to the rest of the world. Number 4, B2B labor marketplaces to support all of these. And number 5, the infrastructure that supports all this. So last mile, so logistics companies like Flexport or ShipBob and things like that support all of these different marketplaces. But we will do more than that. And we also have a non-standard policy that if you're a founder that has done right by us and you've had an amazing exit with us and we backed you in your first company, no matter what you do in your second company, no matter the valuation, no matter whatever, you get a check. So we backed the founders of Vettery. They sold their company at Deco over 100 million. We made 8.3x in a couple of years. We're very happy. He then went on to build an electric flying taxi company called Archer. He got a check. He took that public, sold it. Then he's building a humanoid robot company to put robots in factories. Of course, I have zero expertise in all that. He got a check. I did not even take an evaluation call. I just sent the money.
I love that.
I did not listen to the pitch. I did not read the deck. I cannot evaluate it. I have no skills in evaluating it, but he got the check. And that's true of many of the non-traditional investments we've made.
I love that. Fabrice, we make a hard cut and we open the last chapter. Jose also said this, but it's true because I read all your blog posts. And you sometimes, and Jose told me about it, that you talk about with something that you go to bed and then 3 days later you write something down, right? And I feel when I read about your macro, you're a mini hobby guy on macro, no? And
yes.
I love reading this.
I have many hobbies, macro being one of them. Yes.
Yeah. So there were 2 blog posts that are related to one another. I think one is half a year ago where you were projecting where we're going and why now is the best time to invest early stage startup, and you had an assumption. And then there's one very recent where you speak to global economics for different threats, why you were thinking it's potentially not a soft landing as all these banks, and they always need to be optimists, right, are saying for several reasons. And I think you go into
That's
purchasing
correct.
power, you go into debt, you go into threats of global wars and so on. So maybe would love to hear your thoughts on one, this global thing. I love to hear wrap up, and 2, what to do with your cash now unless you want to have this 5%.
Yeah. So the reason I'm more bearish than consensus on the macroeconomics is, the one thing I've been constantly right for the last, actually, let me take a step back. In February 2021, I wrote a blog post entitled "Welcome to the Everything Bubble." I said overly loose fiscal and monetary policy, these 0 interest rates, negative real rates, everything's overvalued. And I mean everything. Real estate, crypto, SPACs, bonds, NFTs, late stage, publics, everything's overvalued. If it's not bolted onto the ground, sell it, which clearly was the correct recommendation. And we listened to our own advice. We did as many secondaries as we could, which of course is a fraction of what we wanted to, because we're in private markets, so you need to be a buyer. And we were very proactive in selling in 2021. I wrote the next two blog posts. One is Welcome to the Great Unknown, and the one after that, Winter is Coming, where I correctly predicted that interest rates would go a lot higher than people expected and for a lot longer, right? Like when I wrote the first blog post, people thought that the terminal rate of the Fed's funds rate would be 3.6%. And I'm like, I think it's going to go above 5, which is proven to be true. People thought rates would have started declining this year, and I thought it would continue to go higher. And I think now rates are going to stay higher longer than people expect. Has become the new normal. I predicted a year ahead ago that Credit Suisse would default, and they defaulted as part of the things that I see. So where do I see the risk right now? One is the consumer is exhausted. U.S. savings rate is a low point. Credit card balances are at the highest level ever as interest rates are rising, and mortgage payments as a percentage of income at the highest level ever. Percentage of people living paycheck to paycheck is worse than it's been ever. People needing help from their parents is a lot higher. So the consumer is exhausted. So I think we're going to finally see that consumer growth that was driving a lot of the economy slow down. Number two, commercial real estate is about to hit a wall. You have between 500 billion and 800 billion a year of commercial real estate refinancing. When someone buys
sorry, yeah. Don't worry. I'm sorry. Gotcha.
No worries.
There we go.
So when people buy commercial real estate, it's financed over 30 years, but in 3 tranches, and it's fully refinanced at the end of 10 years. So you have 800 billion of refinancings that happens at the end of each year, and it's happening now at significantly higher rates than it was before, which obviously means a lot of these commercial real estate projects, especially with 50% occupancy or less, are going to go under. And they're going to be taken over by banks, which is going to be a disaster. This is also true, by the way, of the S&P 500 in general. S&P 500 in general, you have all these companies that borrowed cheaply in the last few years that are refinancing now at much higher debt, at much higher rates, which is going to decrease the profitability. We have a massively inverted yield curve right now, which has been a predictor at times of recession. The only time it wasn't was in 1966. Also, by the way, in the last 70 years, you've only had one soft landing, which is 93, 94. So the probability that we get a soft landing instead of a recession when you raise rates as high as you have right now at the speed at which we've raised it, which is the fastest rate of increase of rates ever, it's unlikely. It's only happened once. And I guess last but not least, geopolitically, I could very well see, Azerbaijan invade Armenia, Serbia invade Kosovo, continuing the crisis in Ukraine is going to last forever. It's going to keep food and oil prices high, and plus, of course, now you have Israel and Palestine. So geopolitical turmoil is increasing. It's hard to imagine all this that we're going to have a soft landing. That said, my personal analysis of this remains the very best time to invest in early stage startups holds. Right now, all the posers, the people that were get rich quick type of people, are no longer building startups. So the bankers, the consultants, the lawyers, the doctors, etc. Now you have the true believers. They're building companies. Yes, they're raising money. It's harder to raise capital. You raise at a lower valuation. You probably exit at a lower valuation, but you're careful on cash burn. You're careful in unit economics. You're building a much more sustainable company. You're facing way less competition. In 21, if you had a good idea, you were facing 7 other people or 20 other people doing the exact same thing with a lot of money. Now you have 1 or 2. When you win, you're going to win the entire category. And even though the exit multiple will be lower, you're going to do amazingly well. And so if I think in the last decade, when was the very best time to invest? 2008, 2009, 2010, 11, like Instagram, WhatsApp, Uber, Airbnb all came at them. in the 2000s, actually, when was the best time to invest? Actually, 01, 02, 03, 04. And so I am willing to bet that the very best time to invest in startups for the 2020s will have been 22, 23, 24. And obviously we're going to know at the end in the early 2030s or at the end of the 20s, but now is an amazing time. Early stage, late stage is not repriced, and you're seeing a lot of structure. So seed A, even B, I think now is an amazing time to be investing. Where to hold cash? It's easy. There's one answer and one answer only. T-bills.
Then
American T-bills paying you 5.5. Do not invest in stocks today. Do not invest in bonds. Do not invest in real estate. Do not invest in anything else. Everything else is like as a high risk of fall that is not priced appropriately. T-bills, all your cash, and you should have a lot of cash right now. You should have at least 20, 30% cash. T-bills. The rest, early stage tech startups. Barbell strategy, Nassim Taleb, type portfolio
and maybe becoming an LP in venture funds or becoming angel, like
today, absolutely. You should. LPs are so counter-cyclical. Sorry, they're so pro-cyclical. It drives me crazy. In 21, you had all these people put money in VC when it was the worst time to put money in VC. Today, if you're a GP trying to raise money, you're like struggling like hell because everyone's overcommitted. No one has cash. Today's the time to be deploying. Yeah, absolutely. If you have cash today, this is the time to be investing in tech.
yeah.
Either
everybody should become an LP in early stage.
Well, yeah, obviously you need to have cash for that. But yes, absolutely.
Sure.
They should invest in your fund. They should invest in my fund.
Then my last question on the macro, just to give perspective where you think could happen if it's not a soft landing. Like Michael Burry and a couple of others, there's a lot of shorts running until June next year. What do you think now that we don't know? Everything you just said.
Well, no, I think they
what
agree
do you
with
think
me,
is a
basically.
scenario, like a likely scenario? You think there's a crash?
Yeah,
coming
no,
I
think my timing is kind of that, is like a recession of the next year or so, and then the Fed starts cutting rates again, and I think we set the stage for recovery. And so actually, I think that's why investing and again, I'm talking in the private asset, the public assets have it. There's been a run up recently because of the AI, et cetera, and I'm not a public market valuation expert, so I'm not the right guy to talk about it. Like, there's a fundamental difference between what I think that happens with macro and what Barry's and the like, or invest or betting on the prices of assets in the real world. Now, do I think in a recession it's likely that real estate and bonds and because defaults go up and stocks fall? Yes, but I don't care.
Some people are
I don't
not
own
buying
any of that.
US bonds anymore. Right?
I own zero of that. I'm startups and cash. Actually, I'm startups and T-bills, to be clear. I am nothing else. I have no stocks, no bonds,
T-bills,
no nothing.
and cash.
Yeah, no. T-bills and startups, no cash.
No cash.
Fabrice, all your cash should be T-bills. There's no reason.
Part,
no. You when you need cash, you sell the T-bills and you use it. But nothing should be in cash. Everything should be T-bills or startups. Nothing else.
I agree. Good. Amen. Thank you so much for this unbelievable, formative interview. Ellie, also thank you for support here. I think it will be the longest interview we have ever had, but it's good for SEO, and we make a mark for Fabrice Grinda. If everybody wants to learn about Fabrice Grinda, you can now come to Robin Capital.
Look, I'm the idiot who writes 30,000 word or 50,000 word blog posts that no one reads, right? Like if I write a blog post and it's like it's a photo of my son, like 5,000 likes, 100 comments, he's so cute, and then I do I spend a month of research and macroeconomic analysis and details and like reading the notes and like the FOMAC meetings, etc. And no one reads it, but the people who read it are actually high